Welcome to the Lanthorn Loop. Today is a very special episode because it is our first in-person episode, and I am joined by Editor-in-Chief, Mary Dupuis. Mary, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So today we have you here to talk about your story that was on the front cover of the November 21st edition of the Lanthorn, and we're talking about the Mental Health Ambassadors Program. So one of the very first things with the Mental Health Ambassador Program is you talked about seasonal affective disorder. So can you just kind of explain what that is and how that can impact people?
Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder is something that affects people, usually younger adults is kind of where it starts. And then it affects women more than men most times, but I mean, it really can affect anyone. It's referred to as seasonal affective disorder just because it kind of starts in usually the later fall and kind of can continue in early spring. And as people start to feel more sad, maybe hopeless, tired, having difficulty focusing, kind of all the symptoms of depression. It doesn't affect people solely in fall to spring. There can be the opposite of the kind of flip seasons, but most of the time it's fall to spring. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then to kind of combat that, the University Counseling Center created the Mental Health Ambassadors Program, and that's not only combating that, but it's also combating various other forms of mental health struggles as well. So kind of what is the goal of that program, and what does that do specifically to help students?
Yeah, so the program wasn't created specifically for seasonal affective disorder. It was kind of for year-round, but it does come in handy that it was created in the winter, which is when I think a lot of students may need help from it. Basically, the program is offered to students, and they kind of offer it first to communities that might not go to the counseling center for their services as much, and they determine that by pulling data from kind of all the clients that they have and then comparing it to majors and the university, and they kind of find groups where maybe the counseling center finds they may be underperforming and just not able to reach those groups as much. And then from there, those students are sent an application to apply to be in the program, kind of say why they want to be in it, why they think it would be helpful. And then after that, it's sent out to the general campus population. And there's an application on their site as well. And the program was basically created to give students the tools that they need to help other students experiencing mental health crises. So they go through suicide, QPR, prevention training, kind of tips about their own self-care, tips about what warning signs might be in other students if they're experiencing distress or a mental health crisis, kind of how to guide those conversations, and then also how to know where their help has to stop and professional help has to come in. And for that, they're given a ton of resources from the counseling center and everything we offer here on campus, and then even some emergency other type services.
That makes sense. And then what are some of those specific groups? You mentioned that there are some specific groups that they look to kind of target because, like you said, they're less likely to look towards the university for help. So what are some of those specific target audiences?
Yeah, so some of the specific targets they find are nursing majors or business majors. I don't know if there's any specific reason as to why. Those are just kind of based on the data they found, those are the groups that tend not to go and use the services as much. It could also be student veterans are another group that they're trying to kind of make sure they include in the program.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And then you talked a lot about some of the skills that students learn through the Mental Health Ambassador Program. So what does that process look like of actually learning those skills? What do the students do? And I believe they have a training day. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so the program is just one day. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they kind of all get together, and they have multiple presentations throughout the day on different kind of areas for mental health tips and how to handle the different situations and stuff. They kind of open up with misconceptions there might be about mental health or data on Grand Valley students and how mental health is kind of in our campus population. And that's kind of delivered in a Jeopardy kind of game style format to kind of help break the ice as well and get them comfortable in the training. And then there's more presentations given on kind of warning signs that you might see, like if someone's saying like, I'm tired, or I'm tired, like that's one of the examples that one of my interviewees gave me. And then kind of how to handle those situations and guide the conversations. One thing they really focused on was like boldness when you're talking to them. So like asking your friend straight up, like, are you depressed? Because the worst they're going to say is, no, why would you say that? The best they're going to say is, well, not best, because it's not good, but
yeah, exactly.
The best they're going to say is like, yes, I think I need help. And then they're able to give them those resources. And then there's presentations on the resources that the counseling center offers, and there's QPR suicide training. And a lot of this, they also do like interactive kinds of formats. So like they'll have one student act as like a mental health ambassador and one act as like a person in like mental health and having a crisis. And they kind of act it out then together to kind of give them like a real world experience within the training.
Mm-hmm. So basically it's like just one straight day of, not even a full day, but one straight session of everything you need to know. So it's a very quick and easy process for the amount of knowledge that you learn in that time.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot packed into one day, because there's also alcohol and other drugs also comes and does a presentation on that. So they pack a lot into one session.
That makes sense. And then kind of moving away from the story itself and looking at some of the reporting processes that you did and how you were able to craft this story. So you talked to 3 different sources, a couple of students that were in the program, and a member of the counseling center. So can you kind of tell me who those sources were and what you learned from them?
Yeah, so I talked to Michaela Padgen from the Counseling Center. She's in charge of the program. She's the mental health communications and outreach specialist for our counseling center here. And she was so nice and so helpful. I actually had a meeting with her before we were thinking about writing the story, because we knew we wanted to do a story about mental health on campus, but we didn't know what avenue to take. And we had suggested maybe if a student was willing to share their story and their experiences with the counseling center. And we ended up kind of moving away from that, just because there's like privacy issues and, you know, they can't reveal who they're talking to, and unless a student wanted to come forward, it may be hard to find someone willing to. And so we kind of shifted away from that because they were also concerned if a student had talked about maybe their experiences with mental health in a story, it could be difficult if they're talking about like anxiety or depression or something they might have dealt with in the future for like job offers, or if like companies are kind of discriminatory in that aspect. So just to kind of protect the students, we kind of took a different angle and shifted it to like what the university is doing and like student programs and how the students are helping those who may be experiencing kind of the difficulties of mental health. And so she was really helpful because she brought up the program, and all of a sudden we were like, oh my gosh, that would be perfect. So she was super helpful and super, super good to talk to. And then the students I talked to were Kyra Fitzpatrick and Zachary Nitz. Kyra was super passionate about the program. She's a nursing student, and she was really excited to talk about it and share her experience. And she was given the opportunity to actually participate in the mental health screenings from like that the counseling center does. And she was super excited to kind of like work in that and use her experiences from the training to kind of help students even during that day. And Zachary was actually a student veteran, and he was super passionate just because he had gone through training in the military for mental health, and so he thought that this was actually a really great program the university offered, but he did bring up that it seemed like it was in its infancy stages, which it is. This is only the 3rd one they'll have coming up in January. So he said while it was a lot of great information, he was wishing there was maybe a little more interactive activities and like opportunities to just kind of expand on the resources it offered, which actually when I talked to Michaela, she said is something they're kind of working on incorporating. So it was kind of cool to see like him wishing for that and then her being like, yeah, actually we're doing it. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and they gave a lot of really good information in the story, and that really added another layer to the story. Obviously, that's the whole point of adding good sources, but the sources in the story were very good and helped add to the story a lot. So that was very helpful. And then you had a lot of info in the story about the counseling center, and about mental health in itself. So obviously you got a lot of that information from Michaela. So where did the rest of that information come about mental health, and how did you find that data?
Yeah, so I got a lot of information, like you said, from Michaela. She was very helpful in kind of breaking down the whole program. And then a lot of the information I actually got about the counseling center itself was just from the counseling center's website. I used the tab that they specifically have for the Mental Health Ambassadors program for some information. And then on their counseling center website, it's like super easy to use when you open it up. They have a bunch of tabs for the different resources they offer, whether you want like self-help practices or you want to have group counseling or one-on-one counseling. They actually offer a lot of different things, and it's all spelled out pretty easily, which I was impressed with.
Yeah, very helpful too,
Yes.
especially if you're a student looking to find some of those resources. So, and then next question is like, you're the editor-in-chief, right? So usually when we have people on the podcast, they're assigned a story, and then they work on the story, they're assigned, but you don't write stories weekly. So what was kind of your inspiration in writing this story, and why did you choose to write it rather than have it assigned to another writer?
Yeah, sorry. So I've been trying to keep up like my writing skills. I did an internship over the summer, and so I've still been freelancing and writing for that, which is nice. But I really missed writing for the paper. I've been writing for the paper since I was a freshman, and this is kind of like, I want to say last semester, I wrote a little less because I was the news editor, so I was doing so much editing. And now this year I'm the editor-in-chief, so I really don't do any writing, kind of just all editing. And I really missed it. It's really fun picking up the paper and like seeing your name and your own story. And when I was having my meeting with Michaela, before the story was going to be written, and she was talking kind of about the program, it sounded really fun, and it kind of started piecing itself together in my head as we were talking. And so I could have passed it off to someone, but I was like, I really want to do it the way I want to do it. So I took it because I thought it'd be a good time to write it. I mean, it's not necessarily like a happy topic dealing with like mental health and stuff, but writing itself was really fun.
But you had an idea of how you wanted it to come out, so you just crafted it yourself. That makes sense. And then one other thing is and it's the last question here, and it's a question that I like to ask everybody, was there something that made this story interesting or unique or challenging in comparison to some of the other stories that you've written?
I think this one was helpful. It kind of made me feel like I was kind of helping in a way, just because before I talked to Michaela and my sources, I didn't even know that we had this program. So I think that kind of in covering it and making it known, it made me feel like I was helping spread the word and helping get the word out to students about how to help one another. And so that kind of felt special. And then I thought it was really cool that students wanted to take such initiative and go through like a day-long training just to make sure that they're there in case someone needs something or needs help. So I thought that was really something special to cover, is just students taking such initiative to kind of help their peers.
That makes sense. And then if anyone is interested in reading the full story and all the details that come with it, that is, like I said, in the Lanthorn, so you can pick up a copy on campus, but you can also visit us online at lanthorn.com. And most importantly, Mary, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.